Hey, welcome back, Faithful Politics listeners and watchers. I'm your political host, Will Wright, and I'm joined, as always, by my faithful host, Pastor Josh Burcham. How's it going?
Doing great. Thanks, Will.
I should say I'm always introducing you as my faithful host, but like you're really the people's host. So I just want to make that clear. Today,
I am the people's host. Thank you.
We are welcoming back one of our favorite Minnesotans.
Yes,
Pat, me and Pete Hegseth and,
Minnesota,
and Mike Lindell. Those are your three favorites.
That's right. Yeah. Pat. Now, dang it, Kahnke.
That's Kahnke. Yeah,
Kahnke. I was gonna go with the long but
I never actually say my name on my podcast, so that's
really?
why people have trouble pronouncing it. I just never think of it.
Really?
That's so funny.
Pat. That's awesome. Well, Pat, you are a Minnesota-based YouTuber and former pastor who focuses on the intersection of culture, faith, and politics, and I have asked for you to come back on to talk about what's happening not only in the world but even locally there at your home base. So, welcome back to Faith and Politics.
Yeah, it's good to be back. I had a lot of fun last time, and I love watching what you guys do. So, thanks for having me.
I gotta say, like the first time that we met, I mean, number one, you're just such a treat to have. You're easy to talk to. We're well informed, and I think that you have a voice that a lot of people appreciate, because I think you're like the voice that they wish they had, and you've got a platform.
Interesting.
And I'm only saying that because sometimes, like, late night Faithful Politics after hours, I'll be on Reddit, we're not on Reddit, but like I'm just trying to see what kind of market there is,
Oh, okay, yeah.
And your name comes up like all the time and discuss.
Oh, really? On Reddit?
Faith and Politics, yeah.
Really?
So
that's interesting.
There you go.
Maybe I should check out Reddit.
Yeah. but with your large following, I'd love to just kind of get your sort of on the ground assessment. Like, how are things there in Minnesota? Are they better? Are they worse? I heard they're leaving.
Yeah. I don't know when this is going to air. So today is February 13th. And yesterday, Tom Homan, I think it was yesterday, time is a flat circle now, but I think it was yesterday that Tom Homan announced that he and Donald Trump decided to pull out of this Metro Surge that they're doing, Operation Metro Surge. They've always got cool names. And so they're pulling out within the week. So that's really good. And so, I think the plan is that we're going to go back to just a normal amount of ICE officers who would do what they do throughout history, for as long as ICE is operated, so we'll get back hopefully to normal. And that's a good thing for sure. That's a good thing, because it has been it's just been people get frustrated when I say this sort of thing who aren't here, but it is an occupation of our city. And the reason that I called it an occupation is because they came in uninvited by the local officials. They, whether you think it was good reasons or not, I don't, but they came in uninvited by the local officials. They're masked. They're wearing body armor, guns. They're pushing people around, and they've killed 2 people. But the key reason I call it an occupation is that our local officials have no ability to get access to investigation materials on the 2 deaths that happened. So it's like, if you can go into someone else's city with military force, push people around, kill people, and local officials don't get to see the evidence that you're gathering when that happens, what do you call that but an occupation? All the power is on one side. And so I'm really happy that they're leaving. But what I said yesterday in a video that I made is that Donald Trump and Tom Homan and Kristi Noem don't get to decide when this is over. This is not going to be over until we get justice for the people who were killed and the people who were abused. And that part's just starting. And it's going to be a fight, because right now they're not sharing information with our local law enforcement, our local prosecutors at all.
Are there any signs that they're leaving? So saying that they're going to leave is one thing, but I want to see the proof. And then what's kind of the general feeling? Like, is there sort of general feeling of like, ooh, like a weight's been lifted, or like let's just wait and see what happens kind of?
I think it's wait and see. I think that's the way to look at it. Because I mean, they definitely dialed down already when Tom Homan came in, which is weird, by the way, that Tom Homan, who is the guy who was sort of the mastermind of the child separation policy years ago, and is the guy who apparently was caught $50,000 in a kava bag selling influence in 2024. It's weird that he is the voice of reason here. That's how bad Gregory Bovino was. That's how bad Kristi Noem is. But it has calmed down a bit in terms of like the active aggression, but not completely. I mean, there's still film that you see all the time of agents jumping out of their cars and pointing guns at people, and people being wrestled to the ground and stuff like that. It's still going on. Until they're gone, it's going to keep going on.
So can you kind of just give an account of, like, for those who maybe they weren't keeping up with it, or maybe even they just kind of feel like they're not really getting good information, or they don't know if they can trust what they're getting. What do you think that, like, the national media misunderstood? What have they overstated, or what have they flattened? What's and I guess you could maybe even divide that into, like, the maybe propaganda from both sides, or maybe, I don't know how you do it, because you can't just put media into one category, of course. So
yeah, national media, that's an interesting thing because it's so fragmented now, you know. So I mean, Fox News and those people are going to be showing protesters as violent in any sort of like violent encounter that they can find, or that looks violent, you know, which is almost always a reaction to ICE agents or Border Patrol shoving people around or throwing tear gas and things like that. So people who are watching Fox News probably have almost no clue what it's really like here. People who are watching more of the left-leaning media are getting, in this case, a better understanding. And it's like, I'll just say this as somebody who was, like, you know, a conservative Republican for my whole life until 2016, when I retired from ministry and started looking at politics again, and I saw Donald Trump. You know, I don't come into this with a left-leaning bias. I didn't come into it with that. I came into it as a person who was seeing, in 2016, real problems with the candidate they were trying to put forward: lies, authoritarianism, all of that stuff, racism. It's all just come to fruition now. So when you say, like, propagandists on both sides or whatever, I have to just say, I'm sure there's some people who are maybe exaggerating, but on the left, but it's like the things that are happening are so horrific, and I'm experiencing it and I'm seeing it firsthand, that I get offended when people talk about it being two sides to this. Like, there's always two sides, but there's one side that is intentionally moving the Overton window so far out to the right that it that if you say, well, let's give equal weight, no, they're intentionally moving through their actions and their rhetoric so far to the right that I can't do anything but come against what they're doing, because I'm living it and I'm seeing the reality on the ground. So you asked, you know, like some things that people might not see as clearly. I'll tell you one thing is just the emotional cost. The emotional cost of living in the Twin Cities right now is real. It's real. You know, people are afraid to go to the economy is just being crushed because, you know, I've got a friend that I picked up. I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. I picked him up at his house, and he's from somewhere else. He's a citizen, but he's from somewhere else, and was bringing him somewhere. And he talked about, you know, he has a business and nobody will show up to work because, and the people that he has working for him are documented. But this thing about, oh, if you have documentation, you've got nothing to fear. It's just not true. It's just not true. People are being detained, and they might end up spending days in detention who have all the documentation they need. And I don't think people realize what a serious issue that is. You know, that's one of the things I'd like people to know. But the emotional cost of being worried that your government is going to stop you, you know, and possibly detain you is real. But the other thing I would want people to know about the emotional cost here is that, remember the context of the Twin Cities. The George Floyd murder happened, you know, and that was in Minneapolis. It was very close to where Renee Good was killed. And so we went through this, and that was during COVID. So we went through this trauma as a city. I say Minneapolis, St. Paul, the Twin Cities. I'm in St. Paul. I view it all as one city, you know. But we've gone through this trauma as a city. And over the past 5 years, the Minneapolis Police Department has done incredible work trying to gain back the trust of marginalized people in our city. They've done really good work at that. So now here comes this occupying force. And once again, it's what I honestly believe with all my heart is that Donald Trump sent them here to elicit a response, to elicit a violent response that would justify sending even more and doing this in other places. He wants a narrative that they can show on Fox News of people responding violently. And so this city was traumatized during the George Floyd riots. And then, you know, the riots, whatever. Sorry for that word. There were some riots, but I think
it's kind of like when I said propaganda on both sides. You know,
right.
There's no perfect way to say anything anymore.
Yeah. And I wasn't ripping you, by the way. When
no,
you said
I get
that.
it.
Yeah.
I get it.
Because it's like, it. Yeah, but it's like there were riots, but it was mostly protests, you know. And so we've been traumatized as a city. And then you think about the shooting at the church school that happened recently. But here's the huge one for me personally. When our, you know, state legislator, you know, Melissa Hortman and her husband were murdered in the middle of the night. And then two other, you know, another state legislator and his wife were seriously wounded. That happened in the middle of the night by a guy who was dressed as a law enforcement officer. And I didn't sleep for a couple of weeks after that. Like I've said, there were several times where I saw the sun come up before I fell asleep, because the guy who did that was linked to religious groups that I have made videos against publicly. And so it's like, there's that trauma. And now, you know, they went and arrested, you know, there was that church protest that happened. And I spoke out against the protest inside of a church because I don't think you should do that. But Don Lemon was arrested as a reporter, and a local reporter was arrested. And when they came to arrest her for just covering it, it was the middle of the night. It was dark out. Her kids were there with her. And there's film from inside the house of like masked agents peeking in the windows. You know, there's so much of what's happening that's designed to inflict trauma intentionally. There's no reason they had to go to her house at night unannounced. You know, they could have said, "Hey, we're going to arrest you. Come on in." You know, so there's an intentional psychological, emotional cost that's being extracted from the people of Minnesota by this. And it is intentional. They could do things in so many ways that don't bring that kind of trauma. And I think unless you live it, you don't see it. So again, I haven't been sleeping well as long as they're here because I'm an enemy of the state, you know? So, yeah.
Wow. I mean, that is just heavy, Pat. You know, and I mean, my heart goes out to you and the rest of the state and your community. And yeah, I just don't, there's really no good response to it. But I am curious though, just as a former pastor, like what kinds of messages are being preached?
It all depends on the church. You know,
I'm just like, yeah.
unfortunately, this isn't like a light bulb moment. I keep thinking there's going to be this moment where the light just goes off, where
No.
where Christians everywhere just say, "Oh, I see. Yeah, we're on the wrong side, you know, and we should just adjust here." So there are a lot of the conservative churches in the suburbs, and I'm sure outstate, who just are preaching messages of actual support for ICE, support for law enforcement. And by the way, when you say law enforcement, this is really interesting now that the Minneapolis and St. Paul police departments are perceived broadly as the good guys because they've been protecting the citizens while we protest, you know, and it's like, that's an interesting thing. But a lot of the churches, the conservative ones, will be talking about Romans 13 and how we need to respect authority, and they'll talk about God made borders and all this stuff that's, it's, to me, it's infantile biblical thought process. And I think, how is this still being preached in this way in the midst of abuses that are happening to people in your state, in your city? And then there's all the churches that would have spoken out against this anyway are speaking out, and they're doing things like food drives to bring food to migrants who are afraid to go out and go shopping. You know, they're doing that sort of thing. They're doing prayer vigils, you know, 24-hour prayer vigils. So there's a lot of that kind of work happening. And then there's this huge middle ground where people are still trying to take the both sides thing. And I think that's probably the most common, where, you know, so you hear a lot of messages like, we grieve with the people who are being hurt, but we also support, you know, laws, and so we want people to be peaceful. And it's just trying to find a way to muddle through what's really just a human rights abuse on a grand scale by the state, you know, by the government, not the state government, by the federal government. And there's some things you can't muddle through. So,
you know, Pat, I love what you're saying, and I mean, really sympathize with so much of it. I don't even know if that's the right word, empathize. I was,
well,
you know,
empathy is a sin, so you better say you sympathize with it.
I guess so. Huh? You know, and even, you know, what Will just said, it's heartbreaking, and it makes me think, if something happens here, do I become an enemy of the state if I say, hey, we don't want, you know, violence in the streets, or we don't want like this kind of behavior here? And I've said that, like, I mean, certainly anything unconstitutional. I mean, it just feels like, why is that even controversial to say? Right. I guess people maybe feel like they're not doing anything unconstitutional, but again, I don't think they've really looked into it very much.
Right.
When they've said that. Yeah. I just don't think they've really understood it.
Yeah. The constitutional, it's a joke. They're breaking people's constitutional rights all over the place. People are being stopped on the street, and there's films of this all over the place. There's a kind of famous one where a Somali woman was stopped, and, you know, walking down the sidewalk by these like 3 masked agents, and she just kept calmly. They're saying, "Where are you from?" "I am a citizen of the United States. I live in Minneapolis." "But where are you from?" "I don't have to tell you that." You know, she knew her rights, you know, and the guy even said, "If you don't answer, we're going to put you in the van, you know, until we get you identified." And she's like, "You don't have the right to do that." You know, and so I've watched like a breakdown of that exchange, an hour-long legal breakdown, where they said, you know, it's legal for the officers to ask, and it's legal for her to just not even respond. It's legal for her to just keep walking. And so the minute they started saying, "Well, we're going to put you in the van," they were breaking the law. They were breaking her constitutional rights. And this happens all day long. And, you know, I mean, I could tell you so many stories. You might have seen the story of the autistic woman who was pulled out of her car. There's film, like it happened.
Yeah.
There was film. She's an American citizen, and she was trying to get to the doctor. And so she's been on like CNN and a couple other places just explaining, I have auditory processing issues. I'm getting, there's all this chaos happening because ICE had stopped in this spot and we're blocking traffic. She's trying to figure out how to get through, and she's hearing competing commands. Stop. Go, get going, keep going, get out of the car. And with her auditory processing issues, they're all wearing masks, so she can't see anybody's mouth move. She doesn't know where each sound is coming from. And then they end up breaking her windows and pulling her out of the car and arresting her. It's just, and she did absolutely nothing wrong. And here's a key point that if I just have to say it now, because I'll forget. Anytime that you hear DHS describe a situation, you have to take it with a grain of salt, because every time that these people have been assaulted, Tricia McLaughlin, who's the main spokesperson for DHS, comes out with just an insane description that does not match what's on the camera. You know, they did it to that woman. They did it to Alex Preddy. They did it to Renee Good. They did it to the woman in Chicago who was shot 5 times. And now a few days ago, it came out that they were lying about her. You know, the body camera stuff showed. So DHS will create a narrative about every one of these situations. And that narrative is almost always false, and usually egregiously false. So it's just, and this is like provable. This isn't, you know, we have the federal government in a way that's never happened before, using propaganda on a level that just would have been shameful, that no one would have accepted in any other administration. And it's just, people have to understand that.
I mean, we've been trying to talk about how unbelievable it is that we are not recognizing this. More people are not recognizing how inappropriate, or just demanding. And is it that people aren't recognizing it? I mean, I know there are people that don't recognize it, quite a few. And is that because they're convinced by the algorithm, because they are not looking? It's all the things that psychologically keep us in the in tribe and all that stuff we don't want to look at. We don't like, I saw someone post on something, someone I love dearly, and they're an older person. They're like, oh, man, I wish they would take off those masks. Sure does make them look like the bad guys.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, well, it's kind of because they are acting like bad guys.
Right.
And, you know, I have tried so hard. And Pat, I really would love to get your honest answer on this, because I know the idea of it's the both sidism, right, that we were talking about. And I have tried to take on and understand both sides. I really have. I have friends that I deeply, deeply love and care for that very much support Trump and MAGA. And it doesn't matter what I send. And what I'm realizing is that it's never going to matter what I send. That's not really the issue. It hasn't really affected them in a way that they've really realized that it's wrong, right? There's all sorts of different reasons that they might have. But I said this, I put this post out, or it was like a reel or whatever. And I was essentially saying, you know, in about, 3 years or whatever, I don't know when all this is going to be over. Okay? But either way, in 3 years, the 90 million people that voted for the other person, or they're here still.
Yeah.
And we have to live with them. We have to work with them. We have to go to church with them. Well, we've already separated into different churches, so I guess we don't have to go to church with them, but we do have to go to the grocery store with them. We have to, all that stuff, right? So my question is And I know, like, I think what's happening right now is horrible. Every time I say it, I have a string of people telling me why I'm wrong. And I'm like, just show me, like, send me evidence. That's often what I say, not every time, just depending on the person and the conversation. But just show me what you're talking about. I'm always trying to go back, even so that people even respond now. I already know you're going to ask me what my evidence is, and I don't have any. It's just my opinion. So I literally have people saying that to me already. And it's like, I'm trying to figure out both sides because we're going to be with these people. They're our neighbors. And I've had many people say that's not good enough. I'm not saying that's what you are saying to me. You can't say that, but I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. But it's not good enough. We have to stand up. And I feel like I am standing up. I feel like I am putting things out, so much so a lot of my MAGA friends, I've had people reach out to me that have never reached out to me to tell me how they didn't like what I posted. And how they wish I would post different things, maybe more positive things. Several people, not just one person, right? Several people, positive things about Trump or the administration or whatever it may be. And I'm thinking, oh man, there's a part of me that's like, yeah, maybe they're right. Like, am I just seeing this the wrong way? Like, how can it be that this many people are this deceived?
Yeah.
And I mean, that's not impossible, right? I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's like, it's so hard to wrap my mind around. Well,
we've seen it happen. We've seen it happen throughout history.
Yes, of course we have.
So, I mean, do I have to go to the Germany example? Do I have to go to the example where the Christian churches supported that dude, back in Germany? And it's like, this is how human beings work. Yeah. And it sucks that this is how we work, but this is how we work. That
how do we interact with him? I guess that's what I'm thinking, Pat.
Here's what I would say, first of all, is what I try to do, and I fail all the time, is to separate when I'm talking about the right, the people that I used to belong to, but they weren't like that. I separate the leaders from the people who are voting for them. I have a lot of irritation with the people who are voting for them, and a lot more irritation for people in my own family, people that I'm close to, people who have had every opportunity to listen to me for now 10 years, and still just like pat me on the head at best and say, well, that's nice that you care about that, but you're not seeing the whole picture. Like, I have a lot of irritation, and I have a lot of irritation now that it came to Minnesota in such an obvious way. So it's like, it's one thing to live somewhere else, and to say, well, what's true and what's not, but we're living here. And I'm watching people.
Those are your neighbors.
Yeah, and my family. And I'm watching people that I love denying what's happening right in our midst. And that's chilling to me, because that shows me just how deep this can go. The tribalism, the team jersey thing, but it's my team. Yeah. And so, but I do still try to separate that out. So I'll criticize Trump voters, and, sometimes I go a little too far with what I say publicly when my anger starts to seep through. But most of the time, what I'm focused on are the leaders. So I just brought up Tricia McLaughlin's name. I'm telling you, if you want to prove to yourself that the propaganda is happening on one side, all you have to do is do a search for all the statements Tricia McLaughlin makes as the DHS spokesperson and compare those to the facts that eventually come out. And it's not like, oh, she's shading the truth. So the Renee Good shooting, they're still hanging their hat, the government, on the fact that she could have hurt this agent when she tried to pull away, but which again has been disproven by videos. But the original story that Tricia McLaughlin wrote, that Kristi Noem repeated within minutes of it happening, was that the agents were stuck in a snowbank, and they were trying to dig out of a snowbank, and Renee Good came and tried to ram them with her vehicle. And so they bravely fired in self-defense, saving many people. And it's like, that was the original thing that was said. And Kristi Noem repeated that, and so then that message gets out, and it completely shapes the narrative. And there are people who watch Fox News and these other things who still believe some version of that. So then to try to bring facts into the case and to get to the point where it's like, well, look at the videos, this is obviously not what happened. And then to even say, and she wasn't trying to run the agent over. It's like, you can't even get to that point because they've set the boundary of the discussion so far out in Never Never Land that you've got to do all this work to even bring it to where you can have a rational conversation. And people who want to believe that Trump is the orange God king and he can do no wrong and all this stuff, they're not going to do that work of sorting it out. That's just one example. And I'm telling you, if you want to prove it to yourself, you can do the work yourself of seeing, go to this case in Chicago that happened, just, where at first I heard about it and I thought this was some woman who was doing some dangerous, terrible thing.
Who got shot five
times. And so now we find out that the Border Patrol agent sent a text to his buddies saying, 5 shots, 7 holes, put that in your book, boys, and then, bragging about it. And then now
the video camera, right? Yeah.
The body cam video now comes out and says, and shows that the whole thing that Tricia McLaughlin or whoever was on duty that day, but I'm sure it was her, put out, that whole narrative was just false. And if I don't live in Chicago, I'm not so close to it. So I heard about this one because it made the news, but I'm telling you, every one of these cases ends up being not what was described. The only thing that helps us is that people are filming this stuff.
This is a pattern, right? So it's a pattern, not just in DHS, but it's a pattern kind of all throughout the Trump administration, both in his first term and his second term. As soon as there is a narrative to craft, right or wrong, like they are going to craft one. So when the Mueller report was released, I mean, I'm big on the Mueller report, and it came out. Bill Barr went out there and crafted a narrative that was absent of the truth.
Yeah, and then held the report for like 30 days to let that narrative harden before they released it.
Absolutely. And it's like you're seeing the same thing again, sort of like here. And I think that what's important for folks that probably just to think is that if ICE and DHS are just like the first thing to get Trump on your radar, and you're like, oh, that looks bad, but that's just DHS.
Right.
like expand the aperture,
right. This is the way they operate.
This is the way they operate, not just here. This is a microcosm, of a much bigger ordeal. I'm curious just to get your thoughts, both kind of from a religious and a political kind of viewpoint. Like, what is the best religious argument for, I don't want to say like being against ICE, but just, like what is the best religious argument for this time period? With what you're seeing with immigration and everything else.
Yeah. I mean, I think the work that I'm doing myself is going and learning things that I should have learned back when I was a pastor, but it was not because I came from that stream. We weren't so focused on justice issues beyond law and order, which I think I've probably talked with you guys about this before, the difference between law and order and biblical justice, So in the Old Testament, there's all sorts of passages about how we treat the foreigner in our midst, and there's it's not a gray area. It's not a gray area. And a lot of Christians will throw out arguments like saying, well, but God instituted borders. And it's like, sort of, maybe you can say that from the Bible, but not in the way that it's defined here. I personally think, so here's one way I would talk about it. I personally think, as a pastor who was trained in like some counseling and stuff, I think about family systems, how a healthy family, one mark of a dysfunctional family, one mark can be that their boundaries, they have strange boundaries. If you don't have any boundary, if you don't, so you wake up in the morning and the kids, there's some guy sleeping on the couch and you don't know who that is. And it's like, who's in our family, who's not in our family, like that's the thought of no borders, like that's not, that's dysfunctional in a modern world, like I think everybody I know agrees that we should have a border and there should be processes, but then families that have too strong of a border, too firm of a border where no one can get in and no one can get out. And the people outside of this are the enemy and stuff. That's also dysfunctional. And so I just think, just talking about, people try to make these things black and white, like if you don't think a woman should be pulled out of her car and beaten, that means that you want everyone to come across the border. You know what I mean? It's like these things. So it's like it takes a maturity to talk about this stuff. So all through the Old Testament, there's all this talk about how we're to treat the foreigners. And then Jesus says the same things, like this is the, the gospel of the kingdom, involves, good news for the poor and the oppressed and all this, and the alien in our midst is part of the oppressed. So it's like I can throw a few Bible passages out, but it seems to me that what's needed in churches is sermon series, like deep sermon series about biblical justice, or just narrow it down to immigration, how we treat migrants, like deep teaching on it, because it's one of those things that's all through the Bible. And if you try to proof text it, it's really not doing justice to, the whole identity of the Israelites was, remember, it's not just treat the foreigner well. It's a reminder, because remember, you were once aliens in the land of Egypt, so it's like their whole self-identity is as an alien people, and so it just goes so deep that I feel like you need sermon series. And I feel like people could teach those sermon series without ever even being political, and it would change people's hearts about how they see this sort of thing.
I absolutely agree. The individual I mentioned earlier, they love immigrants. I know this for a fact. Mm-hmm. They have had, I can't even count the number of families of immigrants they've had around their table for meals. They love missions. They give, like they don't have hatred, mm-hmm. right, for immigrants. So there's something else going on. There's a tribal and a pull that they've been given that the left is satanic, evil.
Yeah, I hear that. Yeah.
Right. Evil, satanic, and is essentially going to take our country. But this is the narrative I got, mm-hmm. Is essentially going to take our country and it's going to drive it into hell, right. And into God's judgment. Right. So that's the fear. Now, of course, someone's going to hear this. Well, what's happening now? Isn't God? Well, of course, I think God is looking right now. And I do not think he's happy personally mm-hmm. at all with how America is treating immigrants right now. Yeah. I think it's absolutely horrific personally. Can I read a scripture that I looked up as you were, just to throw this out there? Leviticus, and this is just one of many, 1933 through 34, right? It's the law being given at Sinai. They had been released from slavery. And it says, when an alien resides with you in your land, this is from the NRSV, you shall not oppress the alien. The alien who get this, the alien who resides with you shall be to you as the native born among you.
Love them as yourself. You shall
love the alien as yourself, for you were aliens in the land of Egypt.
Yeah.
I am Yahweh your God.
Yeah. And that's right. And there's that kind of passage all the way through. And what a lot
all over
of
the place,
and so, I've said this before, that so many Christians, I think, there's an old story about W.C. Fields, the old comic. There might be nobody but me who still remembers who he is, but he was a notorious, like, kind of alcoholic and philanderer and all this stuff. And they say that on his deathbed, he was reading his Bible. Somebody walked in and said, what are you doing? And he's like, looking for loopholes, And so when you talk about, all these passages about the foreigner among us and everything, there are these loopholes that I hear from Christians. So one of them is about, we need strong borders and all this stuff. And these people are here illegally, which I want to deal with in a minute. But another one is, I'm hearing a lot of Christians lately, because somebody must have told them to say this. Well, they're not assimilating, and the Bible demands that they assimilate. And that's just not true. That's just not true. And so it's assimilation is a good thing for the immigrants, and it happens, in a generation or two completely. But it's just one of those red herrings that people throw out. And in the Old Testament, first of all, that was not a nation state, like a modern nation state. That was what is it, a theocracy? I mean, led by God, at that time. And it's like, and they were a religious people, but they were still allowed to have foreigners. And it was like, if the foreigners wanted to participate in the religion, then they needed to adopt, they need to be circumcised, and needed to, and even that gets tossed out in the New Testament, but it's like for that period of time, they could be there and not participate in the religion. But if you wanted to, you had to then be circumcised.
Interesting.
And so it's like, it's just, there's these arguments that get thrown out that I just think are not, they don't hold water, but it's enough for people to say they're just looking for an argument. They're looking for something they can latch on to. So the other super important thing that I think people need to know, and we're seeing it here in the Twin Cities, is that everyone talks about illegal immigrants, and they call them illegals, which I think is the most offensive thing, to refer to somebody as an illegal based on their status, documentation status. So you're not an illegal if you commit fraud. If you're found guilty of 34 felonies, why are you not called an illegal? But anyway, that's beside the point.
Seemed like you earned it pretty well.
That's a hobby horse of mine. But people will say, but these are illegal immigrants, and I hear this every day. And the point is, Donald Trump, from the beginning, has railed against all immigrants from any country that he doesn't prefer. We know the S-hole countries comment, which, by the way, he denied saying years ago and then bragged about saying last year, because that's how much the culture has changed, that he can now brag about saying something that he denied for years. But it's very important that people know that in the Twin Cities, he came here, the pretext that he used was Somali fraud, and so there is all this fraud that happened. It happens in all states, but they focused in because there were a lot of Somalis involved in this serious fraud, maybe 100, I don't know, very tiny percentage of our community, but those are refugees. And now they're citizens. 95% of the Somalis here are citizens. So that's why they could just tell ICE to go jump when they try to ask them things. But it was a pretext about refugees. And so when you talk about illegal aliens, and criminal aliens, Trump likes to emphasize that, he's been going after refugees, legal refugees, since he ran his first campaign. And he came into my state. The reason he did the Somali thing here, using that as a pretext, is because he learned in his first campaign that when you go out to the smaller towns in Minnesota, there's a lot of friction around Somali refugees. That was a wedge he could drive, because, like I've said, we're a purple state. We're not a blue state. We're red in outside of the city and we're blue in the city, but we're a purple state. And so he was using refugees, legal refugees, as a wedge. He did that in 2016, 2020, and 2024. specifically coming into like my hometown, Mankato, where Mike Lindell is from, and doing, a speech against Somali refugees, legal ones. Okay, so there's that. Another thing, asylum seekers. So legal asylum seekers, that 5-year-old boy, Liam, who was taken, people know that story. He had the bunny hat on, and his dad is a legal asylum seeker in a legal process. There are all kinds of people with legal asylum claims who are in the process, who have been scooped up and sent to detention. And I don't know how the laws work. I think it might be within the federal government's rights to detain people who are legal asylum seekers, but they're scooping these people up and putting them in these hellholes. And so, again, DHS described that situation as he was a criminal illegal alien. There's a text where they call him a criminal illegal alien. He's no criminal record at all. He's a legal asylum seeker. So refugees who are legal asylum seekers, people with TPS, temporary protective status. When Trump talked about in that debate about they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats, those were Haitian immigrants with legal temporary protective status. They are not illegal. They're not here illegally. And so that was railing against people with illegal status. Now what he's doing is he's trying to remove temporary protective status from I think 12 different countries, including Haiti. And so if he succeeds, I think it's still being challenged. If he succeeds in removing temporary protective status from Haitians, then all those people that he railed against, eating the dogs, eating the cats, instantly become illegal. Once that happens, and then Springfield, Ohio, get ready for this occupation where they start hauling illegals out. And again, I hate that phrase, but that's what they're trying to do. The question is, will that work in the courts, to remove that status? I think it's still being challenged. But if they do, then you've just created in the United States, I think another 600,000 illegal aliens simply with the stroke of a pen.
Pat, one thing that you said that I want to just emphasize is that thinking about the reality that we when we're being when we're trying to figure out what to do and how to interact with whatever it is that's happening in Springfield, right? I live right by there, by the way.
Okay.
That was very close to, I have a lot of friends in that area.
Are my facts right then? I should ask you, are my facts right about that?
Yeah, I believe that they are. And it's people are going to, they're going to respond to this, but it's so important that we get facts first, look at what they're saying and how they're, again, the very fact that even with the Alex Preddy thing, within what was it? I don't know, 30 minutes or an hour, a couple hours, it was already, he's a domestic terrorist.
Right. And they said that he approached them with a gun,
Yes.
He came he had a gun in a holster, which is totally legal. I mean, all kinds of friends of mine, I don't carry one, but all kinds of friends of mine do, and they're trained. And it's so he didn't approach them. He was backing off, but still, the narrative is out there.
Sorry, that was I think in the business we call a pregnant pause. I don't know.
It's all right. You can get rid of it in post. That's the beauty of it, right? All those pauses, it doesn't matter.
No. See what generally happens, and it'll probably happen in this situation too, where we talk about we can handle it in post, but because I do all the editing, I'm just I'm just so tired, I'm just going to leave it in, or I forget because I don't leave myself a note. But Pat,
tell it to remove pauses. Anyway, sorry.
It is tough, but so this is a midterm year. like what's your kind of understanding of the politics of everything that's happening here and the effect it may have on the midterms?
Oh yeah, I mean the politics are terrible for Donald Trump. They just are, and they're terrible for the Republicans. And I don't think Trump cares about he does, but I think that he's never been a Republican. He became a Republican in order to run for president, but he is he doesn't care about the long-term success of the Republican Party. He cares about empowering himself and enriching his family, and he's doing that. He's doing that. Now, I think he thought this was really a poor political choice that he made to come to Minnesota, because again, like the Somali refugees, the Somali, now citizens, I think that he gets really bad information because there's a lot of Republicans in Minnesota who are just, I'm sorry, when you get down to the state level of politics, look at some of the national politicians on the Republican side now, where it's like the good ones have mostly been pushed out because you have to be a Trump supporter in order to make it in that party. So now take that and dilute it even further down to the state level, and you've just got they're not the brightest bulbs. And so I think they're telling him, because they're surrounded by people who don't like Somalis. And so they're like, oh, this is an issue. This is going to be a winning issue. And then he sends all these troops in there. And it's like those of us who live in the city, it's like, these are our neighbors. These are our friends. They've been here some of them have lived in the city longer than I have, and it's just, I think he had bad intel on how they would be received. But then, so we came out and we supported our neighbors, and the fact that we remained nonviolent and that the violence happened on the part of the federal forces, this is just a losing issue for him. And I just say, anywhere else that he goes, continue to push back, sustained resistance, loud resistance, forceful resistance, but not violent resistance. And it forces Trump and his people to remove the mask and say, yeah, this really is all about power in the end. And if you push against us, we're going to push hard against you. And that's not a winning message. The bottom has fallen out of his support on immigration, which was his possibly strongest issue when he ran.
What can you go into just a little bit more detail on that? When you say the bottom's falling out, what do you mean by that? Like, obviously, in Minnesota, I think.
If you look at polls, if you look at national polls, now I don't have them in front of me, but I think he is now, I think he's something like 35 to 40 points underwater on immigration in general in most of these polls, where it was like he was definitely positive, like saying, say 45 for, 35 against, that's a 10-point positive. He's like in the 35 to 40 point negative in most polls now on this stuff, on this immigration stuff. And to me, that's encouraging, because a year ago, when he first started all this stuff, the Democrats were afraid to touch it. They viewed it as the third rail, because he had kicked their butts in several elections on the issue of immigration. And so the Democrats were not nearly as vocal as I wanted them to be. So I felt like I was, like a year ago, a lone voice saying, wait, as a Christian, I just have to say, this is wrong, But now the Democrats are speaking out strongly against it. That shows you that they sense that the mood of the country has changed about this, and it's no longer the thing that they dare not talk about. Immigration has now become a strong suit for them, and I'm glad.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's so funny because it's like all of the scheming that's constant, and I think that. So I guess my concern in a lot of this is the precedent that it's set. I am very disturbed by what's happening. I did not vote for Donald Trump. I do not support him. and I can't stand what's happening, and my heart is broken. I think people that know me, I mean, anyone who's watched the podcast, they know that. Um, I, I still consider myself, again, I don't know why I have to keep saying this, but it's like I at least have conservative views, like at some level, although I'm rejecting the terms more and more now because they're just meaningless.
Who knows what any of these terms mean? Yeah,
they really are meaningless, and it's like I'm just I'm trying to do the best I can, and Will and I are trying to do the best we can to try to get something out there to help people think. And what's happening, man, it's just so hard to keep going. That sometimes, like I like it, but it's really hard to keep going because it's like I feel like, and I don't know if you're noticing, but I feel like are we just getting people that are just, again, it's just the same thing. People are just listening to the people they want to hear. And does anyone who needs to hear this message and needs to be convinced by this message, are they even hearing it, or are they hermetically sealed because of whatever our media environment is? And,
so I think,
and they won't even react.
My answer to that is, and this isn't a scientific number, but I think I'm right. I think 32% of the American people are solidly behind Donald Trump. And if he told them to jump off a cliff, they would do it. And that's never going to change. That 32% is locked in because you've never seen him get below that, no matter what happens. And most of them, by the way, are white evangelical Christians. So, which is unfortunate, but this stuff is breaking through with the rest. You know, you talked about your friend who loves immigrants, but is still kind of okay with these policies. And I think if this continues, people like that are going to slowly have their eyes open. But I think what I would want to tell your friend is, you are making a mistake if you credit Donald Trump and Stephen Miller, for instance, who's the architect of all of this basically ethnic cleansing language, you know, that's coming out of DHS, like that tweet that I showed you where it says, you know, imagine America without, you know, being surrounded, without being overcome by the third world, whatever. You can show that tweet on the screen if you want. That's from the DHS. That's from our government, you know. And so when your friend loves immigrants and is buying into the Trump playbook, what your friend is doing is giving too much credit to Donald Trump and too much credit to Stephen Miller and too much credit to Kristi Noem, that they feel the same way about immigrants as he does, you know, because there is where this is coming from, and it's a lot of the Christian nationalist movement. Charlie Kirk tweeted before he died, we need to shut off all immigration from what he called third world countries. This third world language, that is a movement within the Christian right that's real. And what you're telling me about your friend is that he doesn't feel that way. So your friend needs to know he needs to not vote for the people who do feel that way. He needs to find a way to separate himself from the people who also share other things with him, his faith or his conservatism or whatever, but who are motivated by that kind of rhetoric. He needs to separate himself and realize he's giving too much credit to these people because they are not him. I think somebody who isn't wired in that kind of a bigoted, racist way has trouble imagining that there are 32% of Americans who are wired that way, who respond to that. And the 32 might be wrong, but it's kind of looking like around that number. And I think anybody who isn't wired that way needs to realize I'm on a team with some people that I would never want to go have a beer with, people I'd never want to go to a baseball game with. And that separation needs to happen. I separated from the party 10 years ago when I saw it. I think every day a few more people are having their eyes opened up and saying, oh, they say a lot of the same things that I supposedly believe, but they're different. Their hearts are shaped in a way that is not the way my heart is shaped towards the other, you know, whoever you call the other.
Well, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And I just think that's really well said. And I'm going to keep pursuing this idea because I really want to figure out how you can challenge people without completely shutting down their critical thinking skills and just having them turn into themselves. And just it's so exceedingly difficult to do, but we'll just keep trying to do it. Pat, thank you for coming on the
Thanks
program
for having
and
me.
spending time with us. It was awesome.
I always love talking to you guys. Yeah.
Oh yeah, you too. I'm just like, I really do love it. How can people connect with what you're doing? Where'd you send them?
Yeah, so I guess I'm on YouTube. I'm everywhere I am. It's under Culture, Faith, and Politics.
Nice.
So I'm on all the audio platforms. Culture, Faith, and Politics. I'm on YouTube. I'm on Facebook, and I'm on Substack. All under
soon to be
Culture,
Reddit.
Faith, yeah, soon to be Reddit.
Soon to be Reddit. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, Pat, thank you so much, man, for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Absolutely. To our viewers and our listeners, guys, thanks for being here. This is super important stuff. These topics are crucial. Right now, we're at an inflection point in our country. And so pay attention, share this with people that need to hear it, argue with us, but please bring some kind of real facts when you do that and not just what you feel. Let's try to do this together. And until next time, guys, keep your conversations not right or left, but up.